Hi, and welcome to RSM's latest UK to Global series. I'm Ryan Broomfield, and I lead the Dutch desk for RSM UK. I'm delighted that I'm joined in London today by my colleague from RSM Netherlands, Joad Bantal, and we're going to be talking about ESG issues today. Joad, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Ryan, thank you. So my name is Joad Bantal. I work for RSM as a senior indirect tax manager within the Dutch team, and I focus on supply chain matters. Part of the UK desk, together with Melle van der Stoel.
Excellent, and welcome.
Thank you.
As I say, today we're touching on ESG, such a wide topic. We could spend weeks talking about it, but today I just want to focus on key elements in terms of the UK to Netherlands ESG agenda. So if I may, I'll just start off with, what's the key issue that you're seeing at the moment from an ESG perspective with Netherlands?
Yes, what we have seen now is that transparency is the norm. So where it used to be that companies would voluntarily report on ESG, it has become mandatory for particular larger companies. That regulation where companies have to comply with also impacts smaller businesses. So you see that the landscape of ESG is actually changing within the Netherlands and EU-wide.
And certainly for businesses, there is an element of publicity around this as well, in terms of it can be positive if you use it in the right fashion, but equally it could be negative if they're not up to speed with what they should be doing. From a stakeholder point of view, what are you seeing in terms of, say, private equity, lending?
Yes, ESG is a very important topic in terms of lending private equity, because you would like to avoid bad press. It also is one of the factors that companies take into consideration with investment, because if you have a clear policy on ESG, then usually that means that you have your processes also in good order. So that is what we have seen from an EU perspective.
Yeah. I mean, certainly from our perspective, we've seen businesses looking to potentially do vendor due diligence on themselves from an ESG point of view, but actually it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes you've got to be careful about not positioning yourself in a fashion where you fall down on a particular element, and that does away with all the good work from elsewhere. Equally on lending arrangements, cheaper debt is available if you can meet certain criteria. The key issue is, how do you measure ESG going forwards? Are you seeing that in Netherlands in terms of measuring?
Yes, in terms of measuring, you see that, and I think the most practical example is measuring your carbon footprint. That's also something that is part of your ESG. And what you see there is that companies in the logistics industry are getting into that field by calculating what your carbon footprint of your supply chain is. So getting your stuff from location A to B, and what is your carbon footprint? I think that is the most practical example.
And we met with a really interesting business this morning ourselves, and ESG was top of the agenda for that, wasn't it, in terms of fashion retail?
Exactly. I think one of the other examples of ESG is, for example, in the retail industry, in the fashion industry for this client, is how do you deal with returned goods? Because or how do you deal with your packaging? Because ESG is not only steered by the regulations in terms of reporting, but is also steered by means of taxes, such as plastic packaging tax. And if you comply with the ESG legislation or taxes, eventually I think it would benefit the business in terms of reducing costs.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned tax, being tax specialists ourselves.
Yeah.
On a wider macro level, paying tax in the right jurisdiction is something that's really topical at the moment, and businesses need to think about their governance from a tax point of view. Is that something prevalent in the Netherlands at the moment?
Yes, tax governance is a very important aspect. What you see is also how is the company's behavior impacting society. So you have to pay your fair share of taxes. That has become increasingly important and also requires a different type of management.
Okay. I mean, going back to the industry point, businesses having to engage with consumers who have higher expectations these days from an ESG perspective. But I think from a hospitality point of view, businesses trying to be sustainable, 90% of their carbon footprint is in the supply chain, which they have no control over.
Yep.
But from an EU perspective, that's something that's key going forward.
Yes, the EU has proposed some legislation around the due diligence of your supply chain, which will impact the companies that have to comply with this regulation, but also other parties in the value chain, because you have to consider your suppliers. Where are your suppliers based, and how do they comply with labor law or environmental issues?
So if there's one thing that you would say to a business looking to expand into Netherlands and beyond into Europe at the moment from an ESG perspective, what should it be?
That you have to consider your ESG policy. So you'd have to think about how do you would like to position your company. And even though you may not be required to report yet, I think businesses could could benefit from this legislation, because in some particular cases, complying with ESG could also lead to cost-efficient solutions. For example, if you don't have to deal with returned goods, shipping those goods from one part of the country of the world to another, that could benefit the company.
That's all excellent stuff, and thank you for your time today in London. We've only scratched the surface on ESG. It just remains for me to say thank you for joining us today on the latest UK to Global series. Obviously ESG is a hot topic at the moment. It's such a big topic, but here at RSM we can help out and provide consultancy services on that. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.